It's strange how life circles back on you when you least expect it. I had just finished a 72-hour shift at the fire station. 3 days of calls, house fires, medical emergencies, and false alarms. You don't sleep much on shifts like that. You close your eyes for 20 minutes here and there, but the moment the alarm sounds, you're up and running. By the time I clocked out that morning, every muscle in my body felt like it weighed a ton. My boots dragged, my brain was foggy. I probably looked like a zombie stumbling into the grocery store on my way home. I only needed a few things, some bread, coffee, and something easy to throw in the oven for dinner. I was staring blankly at the rows of pasta sauces, trying to decide if I wanted to bother making spaghetti, when I heard footsteps running towards me. I didn't think much of it at first. This was New York. People were always in a rush. But the footsteps stopped right next to me, and before I knew what was happening, a pair of arms wrapped tightly around me. I froze. A woman was hugging me. Not just a friendly, passing hug. This was tight, like she was holding on for dear life. My first instinct was to tense up. I didn't know her. My mind started to race. Was she mistaking me for someone else? Did I know her? Was something wrong? And then just as suddenly as it started, she let go and stepped back. Her hands trembled as they covered her mouth, tears shining in her eyes. I blinked at her, completely confused, but her smile stopped me cold. It was the kind of smile you see when someone finds a missing piece of their life, the kind of story that felt too big for a grocery store aisle. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but she spoke first. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked softly. I looked closer, trying to place her face. She was in the late 30s, maybe early 40s. Her dark hair was pulled into a ponytail, and she wore a simple coat and scarf. Nothing out of the ordinary, but there was something familiar about her eyes, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. "I'm sorry," I stammered, my voice hoarse from the long shift. "Should I?" She smiled again, and this time tears spilled over. "On 9/11/2001, she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "you carried me out of the World Trade Center." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My breath caught and the grocery store seemed to vanish around me. For a moment all I could hear was the roar of sirens. The memory I never let myself revisit came rushing back. The smoke, the heat, the feeling of rubble shifting beneath my boots, the deafening noise, the cries for help. I stared at her, my heart pounding, trying to process what she just said. You were there?" I finally managed to ask. She nodded, wiping tears away with shaky hands. "I worked on the 51st floor of the South Tower. I was trapped. I couldn't find the stairs because of the smoke, and I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die there, and then you came." I swallowed hard. Memories I had buried for years began to claw their way to the surface. I could see it so clearly. The halls filled with smoke so thick it felt like you were drowning. The chaos. I didn't know how many people I carried that day. I didn't know their names, their faces, or what happened to them after. You just did the job. You didn't think about anything else. It was the only way to keep moving forward. "You told me everything was going to be okay," she said, her voice breaking. "You told me not to be afraid. You carried me down so many flights of stairs, and when we got outside, you handed me to someone and went back in. I never saw you again. I never got to say thank you." My heart felt tight, and I didn't trust myself to speak. I had spent the last 20-plus years avoiding those memories. People always call us heroes, but most of us never felt like it. I spent countless nights thinking about the ones we couldn't save, wondering if we did enough. I shook my head slowly. "You don't have to thank me," I whispered. "But I do," she insisted, stepping closer. "You saved my life. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have my family. My kids wouldn't exist. Because of you, I got a second chance." I tried to smile, but my chest felt heavy. "I was just doing my job," I said quietly. She shook her head, her tears still falling. "No, you gave me a miracle." The weight of her words settled over me, and for a moment I didn't know what to do. I had spent so many years carrying that day around with me like a shadow. The losses, the pain, the guilt. I didn't let myself think about the good, the lives saved, the miracles. "Can I hug you again?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to speak. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me again, and this time I didn't freeze. I hugged her back, holding on as tears I buried for years finally began to surface. In the moment, I let myself remember, I let myself feel the grief and the relief, the loss and the hope. We stood there for what felt like an eternity. two strangers forever connected by a single moment in time. When she finally pulled back, she smiled through her tears and said, "Thank you for everything." I watched her walk away, her shoulders lighter, her steps steady. I stood there for a long time after she was gone, my heart still racing. In all my years as a firefighter, no moment had ever hit me quite like that one. The world moved on around me. People pushed their carts past, talking on their phones, going about their day. But I stay rooted there, taking it all in. You don't always get to see the impact you have on people's lives, but most of the time you're left wondering. But that day, in the middle of the grocery store, I was reminded that sometimes the job isn't just about running into burning buildings or pulling people from wreckage. Sometimes it's about hope. It's about second chances. And sometimes it's about a simple thank you that comes exactly when you need it most.